Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at SpencerFernando.com. Welcome back to the show, Spencer.
Good to be here.
In Vancouver, we're now, I use the word enjoying very loosely here, the fact that we're paying the highest gasoline prices ever in North America. Not even during wartime rationing did they have extreme prices like this. Around $1.60 a liter in Vancouver. And if you go 3.8 liters to the U.S. gallon and figure it out in gallons, it's a horrible price, well over $6. It's into $7, I would think. Do you buy the excuse from the oil companies that, it's springtime maintenance at our refineries, there's a shortage of supply, so we have to charge more?
Well, no, that's no excuse for, record high gas prices. There have been wars and crises in the Middle East, and we're still talking about a record, so there's obviously something different going on here. It's the oil companies are partially responsible, but also the government. You have pipeline capacity, they're totally overstretched. There's obviously investor concerns, and there's carbon taxes and taxes being added onto the price. So, there's a lot of factors going on, but I think the one thing we can't ignore is the anti-oil attitude of the BC government. There's a price to be paid for everything.
Right. Now, BC Premier John Horgan doesn't believe that twinning the pipeline from Edmonton to Burnaby will lower gasoline prices in Vancouver because the new pipeline would just be carrying bitumen. But what he doesn't maybe understand or won't say out loud is that the original pipeline then can be dedicated more to carrying gasoline and other refined products from the Edmonton refineries.
Yeah, he either doesn't understand it, or more likely he has to just pretend he doesn't understand it so that he can, have a, half-decent excuse for why he's not improving new pipelines. But yeah, it's basically, it's simple supply and demand. If you're restricting the ability to get supply to a certain area, obviously the price is going to go up. So, it's not a complicated situation, but no one seems to be doing anything about it.
Yes, I don't see any government saying, we'll do our best to ease the gasoline price crunch for anybody.
Yeah. And it's, I don't want to see any, people, any radical left people complaining about, it's so expensive to fill up today. That's what you get, right? Everything has consequences. So if you have an anti-oil attitude and you restrict oil into your province, then yeah, there's gonna be a price to be paid for it.
But nowhere. Well, actually, there was one government once that did give gasoline tax relief. That was Grant Devine in Saskatchewan. The day he was elected, as he was being sworn in, he said, "I will remove the gasoline tax effective midnight tonight." That is the fastest I have ever seen a politician follow up on a promise. And for my family, it did save us about $60 a month. And here we have Horgan saying, well, it's just 1 more cent a liter. But what he doesn't tell you is, don't forget, the federal government charges GST on all the other taxes.
Yeah, that's the big problem, is that it's not just the price that goes up, but the taxes goes up on it. So, it really is a big scam, and it's absurd. Canada is a country that should have some of the cheapest gasoline in the world, and the fact that we have high gas prices, it's been a failure of government of all levels for a long time, and now we're starting to pay for it.
And the carbon tax debate, it's interesting. Saskatchewan wants to be able to restrict the flow of oil and gas to British Columbia in the pipeline dispute, yet it doesn't want Ottawa to be able to impose carbon taxes on its citizens. Is it speaking out of both sides of its face?
I don't think so, because, I mean, it is a resource that's in Saskatchewan, right? So they have, I mean, you can't make someone produce a resource and demand that they give it to you. I mean, that's kind of strange, right? Which is what BC has been asking. They want to simultaneously restrict oil coming into their province through certain pipelines and say, oh, we're not going to have this pipeline here, but then if Alberta or BC want to restrict oil going into BC, then BC says, oh no, we have the right to demand that you give us your product. I think for the carbon tax it's a bit different though, because that's the federal government imposing on a province a tax that's going to have a serious damaging effect to the economy. And there's the jurisdiction question as to whether the federal government can do that. So we'll see what happens. I mean, all of this is going to end up in the courts, and that's going to have a big impact on policy going forward, but I don't see them as exactly the same thing.
Well, also, too, apparently, I don't know if it was the Parliament Budget Office saying that the carbon tax could have a serious impact on the Canadian economy. No one from Ottawa wants to admit that.
Yeah, it was $10 billion. It's going to, through lower GDP growth, it's going to have a $10 billion impact on the economy. So, and the other thing, too, is that's just the overall impact. I mean, that's not counting the billions in investment that we're already seeing leaving the country, in large part because the carbon tax makes Canada less competitive and less of a good place to invest. So I think when all those costs are added up, it's going to be many, many tens of billions of dollars.
Are we seeing that Canada-wide, where businesses that have a choice between setting up in Canada or in the States are going to the States now because of the carbon tax?
Yeah, there's already billions in investment that's been lost, particularly in the energy industry. I know Campbell's Soup in Ontario announced that they were moving jobs to the United States. So, and it's going to be happening in a lot of places in the country. I mean, the problem is we're going in one way and the U.S. is going in the other, and people can see that. So the U.S. is cutting taxes, cutting regulations. Canada lost our corporate tax advantage over the States, and now we're adding more taxes. So, people can see pretty clearly if you have to pick between one country with higher taxes, one country with lower taxes, most people are going to pick the country with lower taxes.
Also, with the foreign buyer tax bumped up to 20% in BC for real estate, does that send a message to foreign investors? Sure, you can build a plant in British Columbia, but you can't stay here to supervise it.
I'm not too sure that's really linked like that. I think most companies they're not looking at what the foreign buyer's tax would be for homes. I mean, it's pretty set with people. I mean, you've got a lot of people, especially from China, who are very rich, looking for another home in another country. And so they go to Vancouver and then drive up the prices there. But if a company's looking to relocate somewhere, then, or Ontario, which has a tax as well, they're looking more at the production costs and the energy costs and the taxes they're going to be paying. That's another problem Ontario has. It's not just that their taxes are going up, but the hydro rates are insane there. So it's another reason a business would look and say, well, I don't think this is the place to invest in.
Yes, at least right now, BC and Manitoba do have an advantage when it comes to power because they have ample hydro. But again, apparently Alberta plays a role in BC's hydro because they produce BC's power overnight from their coal plants.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think there's so much anger in Alberta because they feel like they get, not only does everyone take their resources and keep demanding that they produce it, but then they make it tougher for them to produce it, tougher for them to make a profit. And I mean, you look, every year, billions of dollars gets transferred from Alberta to Quebec, and then politicians from Quebec lecture Alberta on the environment and then lecture Alberta on the energy industry. But they still keep taking the money, and then Quebec, a lot of their politicians brag about their great social programs, which are paid for with resources from Alberta. So, I mean, it's really Alberta in many ways is being exploited by the country.
Well, when's Quebec going to solve their corruption problem?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's easy to have, the most generous social programs and when someone else is paying for it, but they would really face a tough situation if they had to actually pay the real cost themselves. It'd be a very different province in that case.
Could you see if Alberta and Saskatchewan cut off oil and gas to BC saying, well, we won't use your beef anymore or allow your grain shipments out through the port of Vancouver?
Yeah, I mean, it'll turn into a trade war, which is it's ironic. Justin Trudeau is just in Europe bragging about how important free trade is and how we need to have a good free trade deal with Europe, but we don't even have free trade between provinces right next to each other. So maybe before we go around the world talking about free trade, we should actually figure out how to do it in our own country.
Well, they figure interprovincial barriers cost Canadian consumers something like $45 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the Supreme Court of Canada uphold the interprovincial barriers between alcohol shipments.
Yep. Yeah, that was a terrible ruling. So, yeah, I think people are hoping that the courts will actually come up with good ideas or good rulings. But maybe I'm expecting a little too much. I think we could easily end up in a situation where, because the courts are very left-wing dominated in Canada. People say they're not partisan, but it's pretty obvious they're pretty left-wing. So I think we'll probably end up with a situation where Alberta might end up being legally forced to give all their energy to other countries or to other provinces, and also not get their pipelines through. So it'll be a worst-case scenario for Alberta.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after the break.
I'm Kelly Jennings, CEO of Powerband Solutions. Powerband is a cloud-based provider of auction, inventory, and finance solutions that make buying, selling, and financing vehicles more efficient. Powerband Solutions trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol PBX. For more information, please visit us at powerbandsolutions.com.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. A work program is planned for our Finland property that contains diamond-bearing kimberlite. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ADD, and the Frankfurt Exchange, symbol 82A1. Please visit our website at arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Welcome back. We're talking with Spencer Fernando. Speaking about interprovincial trade, what's going to happen when marijuana becomes legal recreationally in Canada? Can you take the ounce of pot that you bought in BC and carry it into Alberta legally?
Well, I'm sure that's going to end up in the courts as well. I think common sense would say you should be able to, but common sense doesn't have any influence in Canada, it seems lately, so I think there'll probably end up being restrictions placed on that, and it's going to end up in the courts again. So it seems like that's like a situation we're getting to in the country, is where provinces' relationships are breaking down so badly between provinces that everyone just fights in the courts, and really raises the question of how unified is a country when provinces are constantly battling in the courts against each other.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, too, they're going to put a possession limit of you can't have more than 1 ounce. What's the deal behind that? I know why they had that limit before, because one would be simple possession and the other one would be possession for the purpose of trafficking. But once it becomes recreational, what do you do for the person who wants several different varieties of marijuana in their home for them to sample legally? You don't restrict how much scotch a person can own or how many different kinds of beer and how much beer they can have.
Yeah, I think the government's really making it up as they go along. I think there's probably going to be a lot of changes and, testing out different ideas and legal challenges. And it is uncharted territory, so we'll see. Certain provinces are going, I think, in the wrong direction. Ontario, for example, is centralizing it all in kind of a government-controlled, basically liquor monopoly-style system. So I think that's unfortunate. But I think we'll see. Different provinces are going to try different things. We'll see what works and see what ends up happening.
Yes, and Ontario is only going to have a handful of stores to start with, and some giant areas of the province will have no distribution at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so people just keep getting it illegally. The demand for the product's not going to go away because people can't get the government version of it. They're just going to go buy it, on the black market.
And how can they prove that the pot that you have was purchased illegally versus legally bought pot?
Yeah, that'll be the big thing where I think the police, even if they catch people with pot that wasn't officially government sold, if they can even prove that, and they're not going to waste their time on that. There's much more serious crimes to be going after, and that's what they'll focus on, and there'll just be a change to a whole society where people, once they hear it's legalized, the letter of the law may not be followed, and people will just kind of do what they want with it.
I haven't heard any suggestion of amnesty from the Trudeau government either for people who had criminal convictions for minor possession.
No, I think they said that they're looking at it. Nothing official on that, but I mean, I think they should give an amnesty to people who, if it's not for selling, but for people who have were caught with a small amount and have a criminal record. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have someone kind of dog throughout the rest of their life with a criminal record for something like that.
Right, and they did a study. They said the most harmful thing about marijuana was the fact it could give you a criminal record and that you might have spent time in jail. That's what the harm from pot came from, not from the actual drug.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's I think the approach that's been taken, this is maybe one of the only things Trudeau had somewhat right, and I'm sure he'll still probably find a way to mess it up, but the idea that we were treating the way our country treated marijuana, I think, was just way too heavy-handed an approach. So it's good to see that change somewhat, but the problem is it's just going to be so government-run, which means it'll be expensive and competent, and then it'll probably just keep the black market going anyway.
And they still plan to keep taxing medicinal marijuana. Other medicines are not taxed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that
no common sense?
Right. So, and they also say marijuana can be used to avoid opioid addiction for pain relief. Any measures from the government to actually encourage that?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I know. I talked to some veterans about that, and they were upset at about the taxation of medicinal marijuana, and somebody had brought up, the point that, people are looking for something that can help them with pain. Marijuana can be helpful, much safer than opioids and other drugs, but the government seems to be almost disincentivizing its use, which is, it's quite ironic, right? You're still going to keep taxing something as a medicine and then encourage everyone else to be using it. Doesn't really make sense, but I think it fits into the idea that they're making up a lot of this as they go along, and they don't really know what they're doing. I think they'll probably just legalize it and then start probably having to make amendments and changes as things go on.
Well, there still seems to be this so many myths surrounding marijuana, where we have Shoppers Drug Mart listing it as a dangerous drug, and yet alcohol and nicotine are not listed as dangerous substances.
Yeah, it doesn't make too much sense.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after this.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead-zinc-silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineered gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, NAFTA negotiations are going on. Apparently, they've made progress in the auto sector, but they've only extended Canada and Mexico's exemptions from steel and aluminum tariffs for 1 month. What kind of a message does that send about relations between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, I think, it was the same with Europe, too. They extended it for a month. I think Trump is trying to, gain some leverage and keep people kind of, uncertain about what's going to happen. That way he has some, I guess, in his mind, control of the negotiations. And it does seem like a somewhat tactic that shows some success. You have, a situation where the U.S. feels they were being taken advantage of, and the baseline was that, other countries were being able to, flood the market with the steel and take advantage of the states. So they've kind of set a new baseline where, the fear is that, okay, we'll lose access to the U.S. market. And, that becomes the negotiation point. So it's not just, okay, the status quo versus what the states want. Now it's what the states want versus huge tariffs. So it could be an effective tactic. Canada already moved to take action against China being able to, send steel here and then call it Canadian and send it into the states. So China wasn't too happy about that. So, Trump's tactic did get some action to be taken in Canada. We'll see what happens.
Well, China also lifted their restriction on U.S. automakers opening up plants in China. Now they can be 100% American-owned. That already shows that China's had to waver a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and, I think the thing is, whether people like the way Trump does things or not, I mean, the U.S. is still the world's largest economy, most powerful military, so they still have tremendous leverage. And previous presidents weren't really willing to use that leverage. They tried to play nice in a lot of cases, and when it came to trade. And China has 25% tariffs on cars coming in from the U.S., and the U.S. has 2.5% tariffs on cars coming in from China. So anyone can say free trade, but that's not free trade at all. China's totally taking advantage of the United States there. So to say that there should be some readjustment, I think makes sense.
Is it realistic to have Nobel Peace Prize talk for President Trump after a softening of relations between North Korea and South Korea?
I think if they get it done, if they actually come to an agreement that leads to denuclearization and a peace treaty, then yeah, I'd say he probably should get it. Barack Obama got a Peace Prize for basically just for being elected. He hadn't even done anything yet, so they gave him one. And I think if a huge war, war that was, tons of people died in the Korean War. It never officially ended, just an armistice, but never an official, actual peace treaty ending the war. So if they're able to bring that to an end and denuclearize the North Korean regime, then that's a pretty historic achievement. People were worried that we were getting close to nuclear war. So if that turns into a peace treaty and, lasting security, then, and it happened while Trump was president, he took a totally different approach. People said, he was too aggressive and too dangerous, but it looks like his threats kind of focused the mind of the North Korean leader and China and South Korea. So, I think if they have a peace treaty, then he really should get it.
Well, some people from the Pentagon said if there had been a conflict, up to 25,000 people a day would die in Seoul, which is within artillery distance of the North Korean border.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have been. It's, people were thinking, it would be like Iraq. No, it would be a pretty horrendous war. And North Korea has a tremendous amount of artillery. They do have nuclear weapons. Whether they can launch one on ICBM is unsure, but they could certainly launch one into South Korea. And you think that South Korea would respond? The thing is, it's not like North Korea could technically win the war. China would intervene, the states would intervene, so North Korea would end up losing, but so many innocent people would die that it would, even the winners would feel like losers in that case. So I think the fact that they're close to a peace treaty, if we'll see what happens, you can never be certain, but if they're able to do it, then I think that's it's a good thing for the world and a huge diplomatic achievement, and definitely worthy of being recognized.
Well, North Korea wouldn't have to put a nuke on a missile to get it to South Korea. They could strap it to the back of a donkey and just slap it on the butt.
Yeah. Low tech.
Spencer, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Yeah, good to be here.
My guest has been investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at spencerfernando.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Check out our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network, if you'd like to hear a higher quality program. If you have any questions for the show or our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.